The Dark Angels are simply not Space Marines. Beneath their oaths to the Emperor lies a burden carried for over 10,000 years, the hunt for the fallen. Few outside the inner circle know the truth, and fewer still are permitted to live after learning it. The Deathwing stand at the heart of that secret, serving not only as the chapter's elite warriors, but as its silent executioners. Today, we'll be painting up one of those Deathwing Terminators. Today we're going to be building a Deathwing Terminator, one of the Dark Angel's pinnacle units, and a must-have when building a Dark Angel's army. To start, we're going to go ahead and rattle can this guy with a full Wraithbone, and we're going to prepare our base with a little bit of Astrogranite Technical. Then we're going to let that hang out and dry for a little while. Make sure you let it sit for about 10 minutes or so, especially the primer. The Astrogranite, we'll usually base him later, so we don't have to worry about that. We're using sub-assemblies here, so I wanted my shield green, so I went ahead and got the Army Painter Dark Angel Green spray primer. Not a necessary thing to pick up, any basic primer will work, and as well as priming the head Wraithbone as well. Comparing it with my previous Deathwing Knight model that I painted back a little while ago, our goal is to beat this model in complexion and intensity. I can see a few spots of improvement already on that old model. We're going to really touch on this one. This is the first attempt I had at airbrushing the Sepia as a bone-colored, tint. But we're not going to be doing that today. We're going to be using a regular brush because I feel like after some testing, it just did not live up to the finish and expectation that I set for myself. So at the end of the day, sometimes, a good old brush does better than the fancy airbrushes there, So to get started, we want to go ahead and go into our Wraithbone pot and pick up any of those locations that the spray primer didn't get. The spray primer is a little bit fussy, especially Wraithbone being such a light color. Requires a lot of coats, but at the same time, you don't want to overdo it and gunk up all that detail. That being said, we're just going to go grab our little bit of Wraithbone pot and just plug in all the areas we know we didn't hit the first time over. I like to apologize in ahead for any of the crazy visuals. The camera does not like the bright white prime of a Wraithbone primed mini. So I'd like to apologize in advance for any of the weird camera wackiness. The Wraithbone Prime is a super bright white vibrant bone color. The camera does not like it that much if it's held at a little bit of a distance. So if kind of details kind of fall into the cracks, you don't really see a ton here, especially on that face grill. Just know that once we get a little bit of shade on there, a little bit of complexion, it will pop a ton. But starting ahead, we're not even going to touch the main model here. Outside of just patching up that prime job, we're going to go ahead and just start diving into the skin tone of our face that I chose. Previously, I never did faces because I was too scared to do them, and I realized you only need 3 little paint pots to make a face look halfway decent without having to do all the crazy intricate details. Take a little bit of that Reikland Fleshshade and just slabber it on there. Don't have to go too crazy. Just get an even 1 or 2 coats, and we're going to be moving on to Gulliman Flesh. Gulliman Flesh is a contrast paint. It's going to tint it a little bit, but also give it a bit of a glossy finish. Once we get that glossy finish on there, it's going to look more like an actual true skin tone rather than just like slapping a peach color onto white primer, which is what we did before. So just 1 or 2 coats of that, let it fall into the recesses, but pick it up a little bit if it's falling onto the face grill. And then we're going to finish this off with a little bit of Reikland Fleshshade. Reikland Fleshshade is going to fall into the recesses, give it more of a pinkish hue, a little bit more lively. And again, it adds a little bit more to that gloss finish, which we like. It kind of brings out that living aspect. There's a human in there, not necessarily a servitor or something mindless. Going to get into the cleaning phase here. We're going to take a little bit of Wraithbone, and getting into those little intricate spots kind of causes some overspill. So just go over any of the overspill spots. Don't necessarily worry about the top of the hood. We're going to hit that with a green, but the bright white Wraithbone of the actual Terminator faceplate there, definitely want to hit that, clean that up a little bit more. we're going to take that Sepia, our real base bone wash that gives the armor its color, and we're going to go ahead and just apply that now while we're at it. We're going to try to bang out everything on the head first before we put it back onto the model. We're going to be going into our next color here, which is Caliban Green. For the Dark Angels, it's got to be featured somewhere on that model. We're going to be hitting the hood, the robes, and I think that's really it. Make sure you get the inside of the robes. They're quite visible from the rear of the miniature there. And we're just going to do a couple even coats. The shield is quite important as well. Make sure you always give yourself a base layer of actual paint when you're going over your primer, even if it's the same color. It applies to blacks, whites, the same. The reason why is when you do touch-ups later in the model, the finish of the primer is much, much different than the finish of the paint, so it will stick out like a sore thumb. It's going to be about 2 to 3 coats of Caliban Green on the model before you get that solid color. I like to keep my paints more on the thicker side. The reason why is because it kind of creates a thick pitted look as if it's painted over an armor panel. When I think of Space Marines, as much as, you know, they're sleek and thin and, you know, super quick and agile, I always feel their armor should be worn and pitted, and anything other than armor coming off the conveyor belt is damaged in one way or another. So that's kind of why I keep my paints more on the thicker side, and you'll see the result after this. Once again, just doing a couple extra coats here. You can tell that first layer does not do great for coverage, even if it's a dark paint and dark pigment over a light base color. Again, you know, multiple thin coats is going to be the way to go. Next, we're going to be moving on to our all-around wash using Seraphim Sepia. This is what gives the armor its main bone color. We're going to do 2 coats of this, the first of which being relatively heavy, making sure you get into all the recesses around the knee pads and behind the legs, as well as in between the shoulder joints and the main torso, the little vent holes and such that array his face. It's important to get an even coat as the really bright base color peeks through very easily. So if you have an area where you're not going to necessarily touch with paint, but you know you're worried about it sticking out, jam a little bit of the Seraphim Sepia in there. Again, we will do 2 coats of this, so it will look fantastic once it's all dry, which to my next point is leave absolutely the maximum amount of time for this to dry. Once it bubbles over and you move it, it's never going to be a smooth finish. Those little circular joints there, I try to make sure there's a thin line of the paint around the recess. Just adds a little bit more definition. On the back squares there, behind his shins, that raised portion of the center of the panel is a really good way to show definition and depth while allowing it to pool into the recesses and keeping that that center spot relatively stained with the paint more so than coated with it. I don't show that here, but around the shoulders, you just want to make sure it's a nice even coat starting at the tip top and then just dragging the brush down. It provides an even coat and leaves a lot of the heavy pooling at the bottom, which shows a little bit of definition. And here's an all-around look of what that should look like when you're all finished there. Next, we'll be jumping into Khorne Red, which is one of the first pots I've ever purchased. It's been through something, as you can tell. There's probably more paint now lining the top of the paint pot there than it is actually ready to use. But I just add some water, and lo and behold, it comes back to life. We're going to be dabbing all the red spots here, the purity seals, the swords on the shields, as that's kind of like the iconography of the Deathwing, and the Dark Angel's logo on his shoulder, as well as the one on his chest. Doing a couple even coats, similar to the green. It's going to take 2 to 3, and just let it dry in between. You don't want it to look too thick. This is, the regal design aspect of the model, so you want this to kind of stand out and be crisp. Moving on from there, we're going to be doing the gold. So there's a little bit of gold iconography there on the shield. We're just going to tab that with 1 to 2 coats, as well as any little skulls and charms that are hanging on the Terminator himself. I know there's 2 next to the kind of like the faceplate area, one on his shoulder or elbow, I should say, and then another little charm holding some bones that hang from his drapes there. So I would just go ahead and just tag those with 1 to 2 coats of the Retributor Armor and prepare for the next step, which is going to be our second coat of Seraphim Sepia. As you could tell, I went a little heavy on this, which is what I prefer. And this is really where the main, bone color depth comes from. So don't be afraid to do a little heavy. Again, this adds just a lot more to the first coat, more supplementary than primary. So I would go quite heavy on that, but don't focus too much on the recesses. That's the second one's essentially for color. After that, we're going to do a big silver step involving the trim of the shield or wherever you want these silver accents. Most definitely the sword, the little 2 prongs on his face, which you'll see shortly when I glue it all together. The little like raised portions of his pauldron trim there looks great in silver or another metallic. The crux terminatus, which is what the Terminator armor gets its like divine strength from. You want to make sure you get a couple even coats on that. Luckily, they're quite easy to paint. I always get nervous doing so. Like I'd overspill, and especially on a bright color like bone after it's washed, it's nearly impossible to get the same finish. But they're quite easy to paint, and the paint just falls right into those recesses there. So the tubes, it's really important to just get a nice even coat of silver. And once we wash it, it'll look fantastic. It really adds a lot of depth, especially if you're like me and going for one of those really dark aesthetics, which kind of counteracts the whole like bright white knight color scheme we have going on here. But if done well, it's just a mash of cool Grimdark aesthetics and regal knight, Terminator armor. And like I mentioned before, these shields could be any color configuration or design. That's the nice part about this set. And here's just a nice all-around shot, allowing the sepia to dry and pool in some places. Really shows the depth of that armor. Looking at those reds, making sure those reds are popping nice and bright, as well as the greens. Silver adds some nice trim to the shield, as well as all the shoulders and doodads, the little tubes behind his arms and such. Just, again, solid coats are going to be the main, consistent aspect of painting a Deathwing Knight, as anything over this bone is just going to pop so much more. The next step is using some high-strength super glue here to bond the head to the torso. This stuff leaves some nasty white residue behind, and you'll see it in some cases where you glue the feet onto the base. If it's in a controlled area like this where it's super tight, it's not necessarily going to make a huge difference. You're not really going to see it, especially if you use just a little bit, because a little goes a long way. But just be mindful when using crazy super glues that some of that dry, kind of like white, flaky fogginess can get on your paint job and ruin your paint job. Sometimes it can just get kind of wiped away by your finger, other times a little more stubborn. So just be mindful and use the correct glue in this step. But as you can see here, just simply putting the head just adds so much additional flavor to the model. I mean, it just transforms it so quickly. And once you get that shield on, the hype is fucking real. These guys are insane. Next, we'll be touching on the dagger handle here, which is just some simple Black Legion contrast paint. It's a little of a hard-to-reach area, not necessarily a prominent area on the model. So just throwing a base layer of paint there just to get some color on there and get that bright color is going to help. It's not going to like stand out in any way. Next, we're going to be doing our highlight phase, which is a quite important step here. It's going to bring out the depth of those drapes and those robes there. We're going to be using Warpstone Glow on a wedge dry brush. Go ahead and grab a little bit and wipe away the excess as much as you can on a paper towel, and just start kind of, whisking it over the raised edges. There's a little bit of definition in those robes, and you want it to kind of, again, highlight those, especially when we put a wash on there and it makes the darker recesses, more prominent. Just a few passes. Try to be pretty neat with this. It is still a brush, so you, instead of, using the brush edge, you can go ahead and dab. That's what I was doing here. Any technique to really bring out the raised edges. These are one of those early level Warhammer painting skills that you should really have in your toolkit as you progress as a painter. Those highlights look fantastic. Next, we'll be using Vorbak Red as a detail color, going over the ropes on the robe and the little tie on the dagger there. I use this a lot because the finish looks more like a fabric color as opposed to like a Khorne Red that's super bright. Once we go to the Nuln Oil wash, all of the little details within the ropes themselves come out. It looks fantastic. 1 to 3 coats of this. Going into our wash phase, we're going to be using Nuln Oil on all of the robes, the tabards, the chest Aquila, and the Dark Angel's logo on his shoulder. Don't forget the hood as well, as anything fabric or non-armor or steel is going to get this wash. I'd say go a little heavy on it, makes the darks look darker, and really accentuates those highlights we put on in the previous step. When we are in this washing phase, it's important to be a little neat. You don't want that overspill, as it will stain the bone color underneath. As always, for the gold portions, we want to hit it with a Reikland Fleshshade. This kind of accentuates that regal gold color as opposed to just a standard Retributor base bright gold. And the try-true combination that I use in all of my models, the Rattling Grime over Iron Warriors for that perfect steel color. Heavy hand, throw it all over, make it pull in some places, adds a lot of depth and wear to all of your steel portions. Be careful and be neat with this step, as this contrast paint will stain the bone color. If you're going for a more messy, kind of grimy aesthetic, don't necessarily need to worry about that, but I prefer to have my stains come through other means rather than a contrast. In the back portion power pack here, I was a little too hastily and got some overspill, but I decided to roll with it and actually purposely add some overspill. I then wiped that away with a paper towel, and it kind of left a kind of oilish stain look. Hard to pick up on camera, but it was there. It's pretty cool. You know, I think I might try it for the following models. This was my first of 5 Deathwing Knights in this lot of them. Really utilizing the skills I've developed since my first batch a couple years ago. Don't forget those nodes there on the faceplate of his helmet there. That's a common spot people look, so you want to make sure you dab those. Zandri Dust to finish off our shield. It's just a different beige color. Kind of breaks up the monotony of using Ushabti Bone or more gas bone. It's a little darker, and I think it does more for, you know, sashes and banners than it does purity seals. 1 to 3 coats of this. It covers very well compared to other beiges. I think there's a lot more pigment in it as it's a darker color. And I use this for the Aquillas on my regular intercessors as well. I use this color quite a bit. And unlike the steel portions on the model, on the shield, I went ahead and added a full Rattling Grime wash. Shields traditionally stay with the soldier, and their scars tell a story. This guy's been carrying this shield for a long, long time, and I want that to show through decades of wear and battle scars. And lastly, to round out the washes, we have Agrax Earthshade on the purity seal portions and the little relic hanging from his robe. At this point, you could add Agrax Earthshade to the purity seal on the shield. Although I choose not to, I prefer to have it, you know, dark and grimy, matching the rest of the shield. And a nice little once-over to show you where the washes have landed once they dried. As you can see on the shield, the metallics really do pop through the Rattling Grime, which is what I enjoy, and it still gives that kind of gross, grim aesthetic, bringing everything down a notch. As we continue to evolve our skill level in miniature painting, this is my first ever try at pigment powders. So what I did is I mixed this up with some water, and I slobbered this all over the mini. But I didn't go on my Deathwing Knight initially. I used this Blade Guard Veteran as a trial run. I did that trialing the airbrush Sepia there as well. He's kind of been my, try and fuck up this mini first before going to your main thing. So in a little Dixie cup, I mixed in what I felt was enough pigment powder and water and began slabbering it all over the model. I learned quite a few things while trying this out, one of which is it's literally just water, so it flows into the recesses and doesn't really stay on the raised portions of the model, go figure. It's a lot more liquidy than even a traditional shade. So multiple coats after drying is probably needed, but I kind of went crazy and threw it everywhere, and I kind of love how it came out. Once you got it on the model, try not to touch it. It will move immediately. As you can see here, I kind of play with the same places, and I'm going over the foot 5 or 6 times trying to get a coat where it doesn't work like that. Your brush just soaks it back up and then drops it back down. Just being mindful to get in all the nooks and crannies there, wherever, soot, dust, and dirt would, pack in on a battlefield. As these soldiers are supposed to be bright and regal with the bone armor, I like to think adding a lot of dirt and grime really just accentuates their story. That's really what this step is for. It's giving the model a story outside of just painting it and making it a game piece. You'll look at this guy when it's done and when you have one in front of you, and you'll say, wow, where did this guy come from and what did he do? One tip of advice I'd like to say when working with pigment powder is kind of keep it off the raised edges so your highlights are still accentuated. I kind of did that on the top of the shoulder panels when I was kind of slobbering all over the place, and on the top of his Terminator armor. Not that dirt wouldn't get there, but it kind of just still brings out those natural highlights. And of course, on the power pack there, just slobbering it all over the place. Those power packs run hot. It's like a nuclear generator or something absolutely insane going on back there. And there's got to be some type of buildup or gross, carbon buildup. It's got to be nasty. So make sure you pack in a ton over there. I think I am going to be doing this on a lot of my models in the future. Kind of see me thinking in real time where I want to place this, and then I eventually just go for throwing it everywhere. One of our last painting steps here is the Black Legion contrast paint. Just to keep it in line with the dagger, I figured let me throw it on the mace's handle as well. Keep it very uniform. I also don't want the mace to pull the eye from the bone armor and that gritty paint job we just did. So I'm keeping it quite mute, quite bland. And there's a little look around at our completed and dry powder step. It's awesome. I absolutely love it. I think it looks fucking cool. And I think a lot of you guys should feel the same way, and especially when you're holding it in your hands. Oh, it's awesome. This guy tells a story. He has destroyed some Xenos. He has captured some Fallen. He has done some cool shit on the battlefield. And what's cool about the pigment powder is once it dries, you could reuse it. Because the only thing that kind of lifts from it is water. So I'm just keeping that Dixie cup around. I lied before, it wasn't Black Legion, it's Gray Seer. We're going to go ahead and just add a coat or two on this feather. I don't want it to be a color because I don't want to, again, pull from the rest of the model. He should be gross, he should be grimy. Just having a nice regal, colorful feather I guess, but not for me. We're just going to hit it with a gray Seer and then go over it with a Nuln Oil once it dries. Darken it down, accentuate those recesses. As any of my friends know, I am a sucker for technical and FX paints, whether it's rust, blood, Nurgle snot, this pigment powder. This is my favorite portion of painting a mini because you're not filling in or coloring in the lines. This is where you could add your own spin. And at any point, you guys could add your own flair and it will look just as awesome. Blood for the Blood God. He just smoked somebody, hitting him on the head with that mace. You know the drill. And lastly, to tie it all together, take that same heavy glue you were using before to glue in the head and glue on that shield. Give it some time to cure so it won't break off. You got yourself a completed miniature. And just like that, you have completed your Dark Angels Deathwing Terminator. That is a mouthful. What a bunch of names. But look how awesome it looks. I think this model looks insane. I think the grit with the bright colors, it looks awesome. It's super unique on the battlefield if you use this paint scheme. This model itself is really detailed, yet super approachable. Great as a proxy for your Black Templar players. With that being said, I have 4 more of these guys to paint, and I don't want to release 4 more videos of the same thing. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I can't wait to see you all in the next video. Please comment your completed models below. Thank you for watching.